a tremendous welcome to our panelist for today. Our wise talker for this episode is Ziv Gidron. Ziv is the director of content at Windward, where he leads content strategy and execution for one of the world's top maritime AI platforms. With a background in playwriting and a deep experience in content marketing across tech and SaaS companies, Ziv has held senior content roles at companies like Hyro and Guesty. He's passionate about translating complex data, which we're going to speak about today, into engaging narratives that drive awareness, trust, and business growth. Ziv brings a sharp editorial eye and a strategic mindset to the intersection of storytelling, AI, and proprietary data, which we're about to dive into. And as always, I'm Natalie, content manager for WiseStamp, and WiseStamp is, of course, the leading email signature management platform with over 1.2 million customers worldwide and growing. Very exciting stuff going on over here. And our agenda for today is: what is proprietary data? How do you find proprietary data? How do you translate that into compelling content? And how to build a sustainable strategy moving forward. So, Ziv, hey, how are you doing? Welcome.
Hey, no, thank you for that welcome. That was incredible. You've got it. You've got the talk show muscles for sure. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, thank you for that feedback. I always love hearing the feedback on how to make these webinars more fun to listen to and more valuable. So thank you. Let's
Yeah.
start with, yeah, thank you. Let's start with a quick definition. So, Ziv, how do you define proprietary data and how do you distinguish it from other types of data?
So proprietary data is whatever data that your company generates exclusively. Right? This could be anything that your company, any data that your company generates. So this could be user-driven insights, platform-driven insights. Uh, these can be surveys, customer surveys, um, anything, much like, and again, I'm not the first to draw the parallel between, you know, content marketing or really good high quality content marketing to academia, where you know data and research that is conducted exclusively by your company, um, and everything else, right, is data that is shared by everyone, which means certainly in the age of AI, anyone can access it and anyone can leverage it.
Yeah, and speaking of AI, companies are able to create more content than ever. So, why do you think proprietary data is a key way to help stand out in that flood of messaging and
So I think
content?
so I think AI has been, um, a crazy equalizer where informational, right? And this is just 5 years ago, right? If you wanted to rank high, you would create a blog post, I don't know, about five best ways to brew green tea. And that would rank if you would use the right keywords and add throw in some backlinks, etc. But now no one needs your specific blog post on how to brew green tea, because they can just ask Gemini or ChatGPT or Perplexity how to do it and never land on your website. And so the very general informational content that used to be the bread and butter for content marketing for the last, honestly, 15 years, right? Or 20 years, I don't know, since HubSpot invented the term inbound, um, that's gone the way of the dinosaurs. And now the only way that I can think of to shine through and cut through the AI generated noise is by adding data that cannot be found anywhere else, that AI will probably access, right? And I'm seeing that all the time. I'm seeing, um, industry reports, we created or that I created at Windward or other companies appearing in AI search results. But certainly, if you want to stand out, you need to add new information, right? Net new information to the table. And that's something that you can only really generate by by conducting new research that hasn't been done yet.
And you actually brought up an interesting point there because then the AI will actually use you as like a source and you can
Yep,
start coming up in results in that way. So that's an
totally.
interesting point. So,
Yeah.
do you see that the assets that you create that use proprietary data, should those have a focus more of like demand generation, brand awareness, or that authority, or
I think
what kind of focus do you
I think it
attribute?
really depends. I think it depends on what's been working for you. I know that at least at Windward, gated content works really well for us, and we leverage a lot of our data for that and a lot of our insights because they're worth submitting your info to get. With that said, um, data can also very much be a brand play. It really data is just, it's sort of clay that you get to play around with, and those insights um, are yours to decide what makes sense strategically, right? If you're not seeing that gated assets perform well for you, find different ways of using the data. But I think, you know, as a source, as a resource for your marketing, I think it's valuable no matter how you use it. How you end up using it is completely up to you and your strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, if you're just spitting out numbers on your social media feeds without any storytelling around it, then that's pretty boring. But you guys, what caught my eye is how Windward really drives that storytelling. You're speaking very clearly to your ICP, to your ideal customer profile, and you're tying it all into um, a communication strategy that you have. So whereas, I originally thought, okay, data can be very boring. And that's
hmm
maybe a specific misconception that marketers have about proprietary data. Is there any other misconceptions maybe that you've come across or maybe you had before you really got comfortable using data in your storytelling?
So this isn't a misconception as much as a reality that is now gone. It's it used to be really hard to do. Um, I remember working on not a survey report, just back at Hyro, we created a chatbot that helped hospitals with COVID-19 assistance. Um, and we wanted to create a report about the different trends that those chatbots have sort of logged through millions of different conversations. And we did all of that work, myself and my VP marketing at the time. We did that manually with Excel spreadsheets and trying to collate that data and clean that data and mine it for insights took months. I think right, writing the thing was the easiest part, but actually parsing manually through all of that data was really difficult. And I'm not a born and bred analyst. Um, and so I made mistakes and we had to go back into the data and it was a nightmare. AI has completely changed that. I mean, seriously, you can just take that data. Of course, right? I'm saying that with a grain of salt. You need to check it. You need to make sure it's not hallucinating or making stuff up. Um, but broadly speaking, AI has made that part accessible to anyone. So that if you and I don't know, this is sort of like a rallying cry. If you can get the data, AI will definitely do the most important job there, which is parsing through that data for the most interesting insights you can find. Um, So yeah, so it's a complete game changer in that sense.
And I definitely want to get into your process around creating content using proprietary data. But before we jump into that, can you maybe share a moment where using proprietary data gave you that noticeable edge within your content, just to make the case
Yeah,
for our audience?
totally. So I can give an example from just last week. So Windward, right. Windward at Windward, we're spoiled for data. We're also spoiled for having really the best maritime analysts on the planet. Uh, incredible product marketers that know the system inside out. So I'm spoiled. I don't even dig for this data myself, right? I just get it handed to me on a silver platter. Um, so I'm very spoiled in that sense. And I realize that's not the case for everyone here, and we can talk about that. But with that said, um, we during the recent conflict, we saw a lot of movements, a lot of trends, right? We track the seas, we track vessel movements, we track suspicious activity, and so we saw a lot of trends emerge in the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz, and the Red Sea. If you're not sure where that is, Google it later. It's closer than you might imagine. Um, and and we decided to absolutely jump on this opportunity to be front and center with our data, almost operating like a newsroom, publishing at least one daily analysis a day of things we're seeing, and along with other posts on X. And one of those daily analysis blog posts was screenshotted by a majorly influential X account, which took a screenshot, shared it with their audience. And I checked it last week. I need to check it again, but that post got almost 1.5 million impressions. I don't know,
Wow.
however many hundreds of thousands of likes and comments and reposts. Um, and that happened completely organically. We did not reach out. We didn't pay anyone. Um, that's just an example of what can happen if you put out um, really good data, but more importantly, data that tells a compelling story consistently out there, right? There's that, if you build it, they will come. Um, and now, you should have a strategy in place of how to make them arrive faster. But also, it's also good enough to just be consistent and making sure that you have an interesting angle to share with the data that you're sharing. And more often than not, people are going to notice, and if you're lucky, they're going to share your work with their network, and then you're just going to enjoy that network effect. And yeah, that's been a really awesome win.
Yeah, that's incredible. I was watching it from the side, and I was really really impressed with the results that you guys saw. And of course, you produced that data in a very timely sort of way. So, yeah, kudos to you. So let's move on to discuss where can we find data. I mean, you, as you said, you're spoiled
Yeah,
for data. You have the experts. Maybe you can take us through a typical process of finding data, and then using it to create content.
sure. So I think step one is really figuring out what sort of data your system. I mean, most SaaS products will generate some sort of data, right? Um, obviously, social media platforms create a lot of user-generated data. Um, Pyro, for example, created a lot of really interesting data from aggregating millions of conversations, anonymous conversations, of course, with patients across the US. And that put together created some really interesting trends that were worth talking about. Um, so I think so first of all, check if your system generates any interesting data at scale, right? It's not an interesting story if it's just one data point, if it's just one user or one chatbot conversation. But when you multiply that at scale, right? But a million conversations, once you splice that, you start seeing trends, right? Or a million user utterances or etc. So number one is system generated data or platform generated data. What data is your platform generating? Um, and then if you don't have that or if that doesn't feel interesting enough, another avenue you can search is customers, is your customers. Um, and if you have a good amount of customers, and even if you don't, right, if you're working, there's a scale here, right? If you're working with enterprise customers, if you create a report or a survey report of just 50 of these customers, but these customers are Coca-Cola or Chevron, that's going to be wildly interesting. And if you have, I don't know, millions of users or thousands of companies as customers, then again, that is data that's going to be interesting by its sheer scale and by the trends that it unveils at scale. So, so user generated data is another thing to look for. Um, and those are the two main avenues. um, you can also, I don't know, you can do, depending on your company size, you can try and generate data from internal surveys. Um, but what's most interesting are these two, right? It's the data, or thirdly, right? If you don't have really enough customers yet, you can create data from your ICPs or from the audience that you would love to have as customers, right? So you can survey, I don't know, in the case of WiseStamp, you can survey, I don't know, thousands of marketers that are not necessarily your customers yet, but on trends, on their digital preferences or what have you. Um, and the guiding principle here is whether this is something that has been generated by your system, by your customers, or by your audience. At the end of the day, this is yours to share, right? This is something that you created from scratch, which is a lot to say these days, and that no one else has access to. And once you have that, you can decide what to do with it. But that right there is an incredible asset to have.
Yeah, so I'm hearing from you in terms of my next question was going to be okay, so which departments maybe sit on the most interesting data? And I'm hearing from you, it might be if you're a software, it'll be your product team. Um,
Totally.
and and if you want to look into your customers, then that'll be your customer success and
Yeah.
support teams.
Hmm.
Um, and then the marketing team can also do external surveys. You could put money behind it, but not necessarily. It just takes a
Yeah.
little bit longer, in my experience, if you don't put money behind it. And that's
Right.
for, yeah, and that's for a certain set of data that maybe it's not specific to your product, but you might be able to weave it into your storytelling and at least into your strategy and in what you're prioritizing within your messaging. So
Yeah.
these very
Totally.
solid advice here. Yeah, thank you, Ziv. Um, that's fascinating. And so, is there maybe some surprising sources of data that you've come across, or something that's been overlooked as a source of data, maybe that you've seen in your experience in different types of companies? We've spoken about Guesty, Hiro, Windward.
Yeah, so I think always be open. This isn't, it's something that we didn't end up doing, but one of our product marketers saw a real surge in vessel movement near Cannes for the Cannes Film Festival. Um,
Oh,
so that was cute. We didn't end up going with it, but if we did, it would have been really cool. No, but always, I think I think try not to box yourself in. Um, I think step one is really getting the best data you possibly can, right? And um, try to approach it with neutrality as opposed to coming at it with knowing exactly what story you want to tell. Um, Try to come to it, you know, with curiosity, um and let it tell you something, right? And again, with AI now, you can do this at the speed of light, which really has lowered the bar of entry for everyone, and that's incredible. But I think let the data tell the story first before you project whatever story you want it to tell first. um yeah, see what you have, and then use that, but don't come with your own pre-built or preconceived narrative that you want the data to serve, because a lot of the times that's just not going to work out. um you know
Yeah. Thank you for that. And actually, somebody just asked here in the chat, what role do you think AI-based synthetic research techniques would play in the coming days when it comes to data generation? And I've actually seen this where there are AI tools out there that will simulate, let's say, a heat map of a platform. And you can place that onto your platform, and then based on aggregated, user behavior, um, it'll give you a set of data points. So it's based on behavior that is out there, but it's not actual eyeballs that were on your site. It's not heat maps that were created naturally. So, what's your opinion on that?
I think synthetic data, and again, sort of harkening back to this idea of AI generated content, I think that authentic, net new, unsynthesized, and data that you could, I think, if anything, the task um, of really showing receipts is going to, right, if it used to be enough to write in the beginning of a survey report, this data was collected from a survey of whatever 50,000 American adults. I think these sections are going to need to become a little more specific and a little more robust, um, because we're, in general, we are entering, right, this age of, a lot of synthetic data, a lot of misinformation, disinformation, a lot of AI slop. So being able to prove that your data is authentic and was conducted, uh, you know, with integrity, is going to play, I think, a pretty major role going forward.
Hmm. That's an excellent point. Yeah, thank you, Ziv. Especially if you're using data to really build up that trust
Hmm.
and your credibility, then you might want to be somewhat careful around using AI to generate uh, the data, especially if you're using it as a main um, communication strategy, as a main marketing strategy.
I
So
think
I want
the
to.
danger there, just to put a cap on it, I think the risk there is when your customers are gonna ask where that data come came from, and right, it's one thing to be able to put it out there to market, and really not having to uh, explain too much exactly, you know. But the risk you're running into is your customers wanting to know where that data comes from, or if it feels unaligned with the way they've experienced your service or platform. So yeah, so definitely something to look out for.
Yeah, and maybe what's coming up for me is where in the funnel they are. So, like when you're introducing this content, maybe if it's really at the top of the funnel and they're not even talking to you yet, but you're just exposing them maybe even to your niche, to your category.
Yeah.
And then as you move further down, then you will start exposing them to data that's is much more, carefully created, not created rather, but gathered. And I want to do a quick screen share and actually show. You're seeing my screen, right, Ziv, the slide?
I am. Yeah.
Um, us being marketers and we're using our own product, we saw some interesting data points as we were using WiseStamp, as using our email signatures in preparing for different marketing efforts. So we actually rolled out a banner to specific employees within our company, which encouraged recipients to follow us on LinkedIn. And you could click on the banner and it led straight to our LinkedIn page. We actually saw that we had a 377 total clicks. So we could track the clicks. I want to say with the WiseStamp solution, we follow the highest standards in privacy. We don't access,
Mhm.
read, store email content, but we are able to see, as we've been speaking about, the different behaviors of users, what they're using, which of our features they're using, and this is something that I was able to check in with our product team and also some of our internal analytics. Any client that signs up to WiseStamp has access to analytics on clicks and stuff like that. So it's very cool. And we actually followed our own advice and we uploaded this banner to any of the departments that didn't have higher priority banners. So there's, the legal team, they need to have that disclaimer. So we wanted to make sure that this banner wasn't replacing that, for example. And we did nothing else in the way of trying to grow our followers on LinkedIn. And we actually saw in 1 month a 17% increase in our followers. So we were able to sort of correlate that to this change. And that was very exciting. Whoa. I was not expecting. Hey, my designer added these cool,
Nice.
these cool transitions. That was super smooth. Thank you, Debir. Shout out to Debir. Um, and we also rolled out these webinar invitations to our banners. Now, again, our emails weren't telling people necessarily to register for the webinar. These were banners that were actually across the entire company as well. And so this was like a very secondary message within the email, and yet recipients saw it and they responded, and we actually saw a 40% increase in webinar registrations when we rolled out our email signatures. So very exciting use case for us,
Hmm.
and awesome when we are able to see that our stuff works. So I'm going to exit out of that screen share, and now of course, I lost my place. 1 second. Sorry, one moment. Just pulling up the screen here. Still getting used to managing the conversation and also the slides. It always trips
Hmm.
me
Hmm. Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
So
I
as
I
a true men,
once
yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
no, I once got logged off completely
Oh,
while hosting a webinar.
that's
So I know
literally my
your
worst
pain.
nightmare. That's my
Yeah,
worst
it was
nightmare.
yeah. It only happened for 3 seconds, but those were the three longest seconds of my life.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
bet. Oh my gosh. So let's hope nothing else trips us up. And I just want to extend a thank you to everyone here. And as a token of our appreciation for joining us live, we're offering you a discount for WiseStamp that's going to be valid until Monday, July 21st. You can present discount code WiseStamp6 in one word, and this is valid for new customers only. So for up to 200 seats, you can get 15% off, and for over 200 seats, you get 20% off. And that's just thank you for being here. We really appreciate your time and very excited to continue this conversation with Ziv. So now let's move on to okay, uh, you've gathered all this data and you're using AI possibly to turn it into some compelling content, some resonant content. Can you take us through what that process looks like for you?
Yeah, so I think again, right? It really depends on what works for you. Um, but first, I think the first step is understanding how much meat you have on the bone, right? How much data you actually have to work with. So, so it could merit just a single LinkedIn or X post, or it could merit a full 30-page survey report. So that really depends on how much story, how much rope do you have to use. So once you identify that, you need to identify, and again, that is something that AI can help you with, is to identify the most important points, the most important stories that your data is telling, right? A lot of it might be okay, but you want to put forth what's most interesting, what's most compelling, um, front and center. And then once you have that, then you can really, right? The world is your oyster, and again, you can take the guide that you created, or you could create the survey report that you created, or whatever the data generated report that you created, and then you can repurpose that into 5 new blog posts, or you can repurpose that into 40 different X posts or LinkedIn posts. You can convert that into a script, right? Ross Simmons, who I've been following for years, talks about content as an asset, as a stock, right? And is a big proponent of repurposing and really squeezing the lemon out of every content piece that you put out there, right? The original sin of all content marketers is that we create something, we work on something for, I don't know, 3 months, uh, then it's time to go live with it, we publish, and we forget about it, and we just enjoy the initial results and we move on to the next thing. um and I think, right, we all do that. um but what you really want to do is view any asset that you produce, especially if it's really high quality and data driven, and think of all the possible ways you can repurpose it, right? And that can, depending on how evergreen that data is, but it could be for a year, it could be um, to keep plugging it into your next blog posts, or to your next social media posts, or to your next webinars, right? Keep repurposing that asset until you feel like you've fully taken advantage of it. But yeah, so if to sort of draw that line is sort of um, get the data, generate the data, then see how much of it is relevant. So step two is really parsing that data for insights. Once you know what you have to work with, decide what you want to create, what type of asset. And again, this could also be dictated by what's been working. If reels on Instagram have been working well, and survey reports have not, then just create a billion different reels from that data. But that's the third step, is choosing the initial asset you want to create, and then obviously distributing it however you want to. And then step four is repurposing it until you squeeze all of its value and move on to the next project.
Can you maybe walk us through like an actual, maybe recent example where you were creating a piece of content from the data? Like, what does that process really look like? Are you opening up ChatGPT? You're uploading the Excel sheet? Of course, a private paid version of ChatGPT that stays uh, that stays private. So,
Hmm.
can you maybe walk us through, just for those of us who are newer to this kind of process, what that looks like? if you're able
Yeah,
to give any details.
of course. So, as I said, for the last 2 weeks, we've been publishing a lot of content around the maritime fallout of the conflict in the Persian Gulf. And we did daily blog posts, which I will then take each individual blog post and use ChatGPT to suggest a LinkedIn post or an X thread. Um, so that was for each one of those. What we also did is we took images from those blog posts, moved it to our design team, who used AI tools to expedite the process from weeks to days of creating a video snippet. I used 11 Labs to create a voiceover that
Oh,
went
cool.
along with those videos. Um, so we really and then we put an image here, an image there on X, right? So that happened daily. Um, and then at the end of last week, we created a carousel recapping all of the insights, right? You can go to our LinkedIn and see all of that. So again, rather than just saying, okay, we posted these blog posts, now we can keep going. We said no. We're now going to recap. We're going to recap all of that data that we worked so hard on getting, and we're going to create another asset. And
Wow.
today or tomorrow, we're actually going to go live with a really beautiful infographic breaking down all the main trends from all of that work. So, again, it's the same data, right? This isn't new data that we're bringing to the table, but what we're doing now is just reframing it to create a completely new asset, right? So I think, and we also use that data for a webinar, for the emergency webinar we had, and we're going to use clips from that webinar. I mean, there's always more that you can squeeze from the content that you're creating and from the data that you're creating until it goes dry.
That's very, very impressive. And I guess I would initially think, okay, wouldn't people get tired of seeing the same data from you? And that would make me, as a marketer, at first make me hesitant to maybe do that kind of like broadcasting of the same data. But on the other hand, you packaged it in different ways so that it was able to reach the audience where they were at in that particular moment. So numbers that are in a graphic might sit differently than numbers that are in a
Totally.
short, that are in video form.
Totally.
Uh,
And I mean, right, what is not to get too poetic, but what is, human storytelling? We're basically telling the same story or the same
That's true.
stories over and over again in different mediums and different formats. But to ground it a little more in B2B SaaS content marketing, um, you got to keep in mind that a lot of people are going to see that data for the first time, right? I think that we kind of we get into this habit of sort of thinking that we might be a little more important than we are as a company, right? As a company, or that everyone in the world has for sure seen the new data that Windward has produced and has so voraciously shared with the world, where in fact a lot of people miss it. Um, so I mean, sure, if you use the exact same data points every single day, and if you do it in much the same way, then that might get old. But if you keep the story fresh and you continue bringing new perspective and new angles to the story, people are not going to get bored. They're going to want more for sure.
And Spotify Wrapped actually is another cool use case of using
Yeah,
just straight up customer data. What are
the
your thoughts on
coolest.
that?
But I wish we could create a maritime. AI wrapped of behavioral, ship vessel movements in the sea. No, but I think there's a lot of specificity here. I think it's not only an amazing case study in format and right and the way they packaged it is being now copied by all of their competitors. I think it's also a case study um, in really understanding your data, right? So sort of that step that I was talking to, I can only imagine, the people at Spotify said whenever they were conceiving of this for the first time, okay, we have all of this data. Um, what are we going to do with it? And like, and that step is probably the longest step, certainly for them, because sometimes, right, if you're really spoiled, right, and if you get to work at a place like Spotify, um, you have almost too much to work with.
Yeah.
And then the challenge is not searching for those angles. It's zeroing down on what would be most interesting. Um, and I think that's true for any company. I think you guys did a good job with making that correlation between banner clicks and LinkedIn followers. Um, and again, that's the work. That's where the work happens, right? And that is sort of human work that is not going to be replaced anytime soon. It's not only creating the data or parsing through it, it's really understanding in a very nuanced way what is interesting and why is it interesting to your audience, um, and how do you want to show it. So
Yes,
Spotify absolutely
ChatGPT.
killed it.
Yeah, and ChatGPT can never understand like what gets people excited, what gets them giddy,
I
and
mean, totally. And I mean, it can offer great suggestions, and every day it's doing, an astounding job at doing that. But at the end of the day, it can't replace your knowledge of your audience, your very specific knowledge, that's not only created from being able to scour the entire web for information, it's also from conversations with your sales team or conversations with your product team and your customer success teams. Um, so that specificity, the more specific you can get about how you use your data to create content, I believe, or from my experience, the better the results will be.
and so as you are becoming more aware of the type of data that is accessible to you, and also um, you're more aware of the type of storytelling that resonates with your audience, do you have like a it sounds like you have a specific framework over at Windward of how to package that data, or was the whirlwind last week of like daily blog posts and shorts and webinar, was that like kind of off the cuff and outside of
It
your
was
general
completely right.
protocol?
Maybe I shouldn't be sharing this, but no, it was completely off the cuff. I mean, this gig is nothing but experimentation. Yeah, no, completely. I mean, we found a system that worked for us, and we had to do it really fast because the news was coming out constantly at a very rapid pace. But yeah, no, it was completely um, uh, investigation and trial and error. Um, so yeah, so we definitely have some frameworks of how to do it on an ongoing basis. But again, right, it changes, right? The only way um, you can really break out and create something worthwhile is if you tackle every new project, you know, with a completely new lens, right? Because if you keep repeating, and of course things you can automate a lot of the tedious work of, for example, parsing through the data, collating that data, cleaning it, um, repurposing. Um, but every project, uh, I believe, is completely unique and should be viewed as such and should be experimented with.
Um, so moving on to the distribution, you've touched a lot upon what you did even just most recently. So what about metrics? Like if you are approaching this with new eyes each time, what kind of what kind of ROI are you watching out for? What metrics are you setting with each new
Yeah.
project?
So it's a project, it's a case by case, right? But for all survey reports or what have you, long form content that I've produced in the past using data, that was always the centerpiece of a much wider campaign, right? So I would never just measure pure downloads or MQLs and leads that have converted just from downloading the campaign, the asset. I always look at it in a much wider framework um, of having that be sort of the centerpiece, the cherry on the top of that campaign's cake, but then everything around it, right? The videos around it, then a webinar around it, um, blog posts around it, other mini guides around it. Everything should serve the same campaign. This is right. That sort of asset is just the centerpiece. Um, but all the initiatives that you create around it. And that can also be outbound cadences that you give to your BDRs that are based on that asset or data that they used, right? It should all be attributed back to that campaign. That's how I would normally um, measure the success of an asset, not just purely by how many people downloaded it or viewed it, but just how much in general, right? That data, that main asset having been repurposed into many different smaller assets or different assets, then that is what you want to measure on a whole, not just the single asset, but all of the assets that were created from that data.
That's a really important insight. And so it kind of feeds into my next question of how do you keep your efforts around communicating content that is based on your proprietary data, and how do you mesh that with a greater content strategy or a greater branding strategy?
Great question. I think that your strategy should, right, and this is different for any company, but the data, it shouldn't be that you create your strategy around that data. It should very much be the other way around, right? That data
Mhm.
is just another tool to serve your strategy and to tell a broader story that you want to tell. But if you keep letting your strategy be really influenced by tactical projects, um, it's going to become really scattered. So I think, and again, it's just a way of not drowning in the sea of possibilities. It's being um, really focused on how you want to use that data to serve your broader strategy and not the other way around.
Excellent point. I want to quickly just mention to the audience, if you have questions and you came in after my housekeeping, please do click on the icon with the question mark, and that is where you can submit your question before we wrap up. If you have anything that you want to slip in, Anshal asked a very good question earlier about using AI-based more synthetic research techniques to create proprietary data. And so we chatted about that a little bit, and that was a really important point that you brought up. So thank you, Anshal. And so I want to kind of wrap it up for our audience in for the teams that are really just getting started with tapping into proprietary data. Maybe what's one low lift way that they can start using it today, and maybe if you have a tip also on how to get that buy-in from different team members that the busy BI person or the busy developer that won't necessarily see the value in spending time on that Jira ticket on your request for more data. How can they start introducing that into their environments?
So I'm going to go here with a completely hypothetical scenario. Let's say that this is you know, a really small startup with zero buy-in, right? Your other stakeholders just think that marketing are the annoying art school kids, and they don't understand why any of it is important. I'm also going to run the hypothetical that your CEO doesn't understand um, at all why this is important and refuses to give you even the smallest budget to run a simple survey monkey survey. And then so what I would do is create a really like a really strong, right? So think of all of the things that you can do without that, right? What can you do? And these are things, right? I worked at some when I started at Hyro, we were a 10 people team. So that were questions that I had to ask myself constantly. What do I do with no budget and no so so those are the first questions that you want to ask yourself. Um, what can I do by myself if I don't have that budget or I don't have that executive buy-in or stakeholder buy-in? What I would do is, depending on what your audience is, I would create really strong questions, then some put them into type form, and then send them to everyone I know, right? Just send them out to your family, right? No one needs to know who filled in the survey, as long as, and right, it depends on the topic. Some topics are way too niche. But if your product, I don't know, let's say, uh, let's say it's day one at WiseStamp, okay? And and I really think that okay, that maybe I can create something interesting about the way people use email. So not necessarily signatures, but okay. So that is the broadest possible thing I can topic. And then I would boil it down to really interesting questions, all questions that will hopefully serve the end goal of, you should really have amazing signatures at the bottom of your email. But first I would start with that, with step one. Once I have all of those questions, I think, right, 95% of us have emails. Send it to everyone you know. And send it to your parents, send it to your siblings, and have them send it to their friends. Um, and there, right? It doesn't. I think that um, a lot of marketers have this fear of it being overcomplicated or over expensive, or ooh, data. I'm not a data analyst. Data is the scary word, but data can be a type form uh, um, survey that you cooked up and sent to your friends and cousins, um, and the insights are still going to be super interesting because they're people and they're users of emails, right? So start first by just starting, right? I think that's always my best advice. Is if you don't have the resources you feel you need, then see what resources you do have and work with what you have. And I promise you that it will be easier than you think. And that the and once you have that, right, once you have this case study, once you've proven the concept, maybe then um you know executive leadership will cuff up some budget. Maybe.
We can only hope, right? So if you're
Mhm.
already putting in the effort and we're strapped for resources of different types, so how can we make sure that the data that we gather is future proofed, that we can keep it useful for more longer term branding communication goals?
So I think there are going to be timely trends, or that really depends on you, right? The work that for the data, the work we did in the last weeks was specifically timely. Okay. And that's what we wanted. Um, but you can also create, uh, you know, data that talks about broader trends or yearly trends, right? A very popular format is the five, what have you, biggest trends in email marketing in 2025. So that serves you a year, right? If you publish something like that in January, or if you do something around predictions, which is also data, right? um, if you do that in the December of that year, that will last you for at least Q1 of the following year. um, Data, you know, has a tendency to become stale with time. But there are definitely stories that it can tell that remain evergreen for at least a year.
That's an interesting point. And even if you start comparing the data, let's say from year to year, then you start building a
Absolutely.
trend and you start building reports. And so
Yeah.
that's yet another layer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing point for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Zeev. This has been incredible. I've really appreciated picking your brain and all the knowledge and expertise, and also the cool ideas that you've given our audience.
Yeah, of
So thank you
course.
so much. It sounds
My
like you guys
pleasure.
had, yeah, thank you. And it sounds like you guys had a total whirlwind last week. So congratulations to you and your marketing team for these incredible
Yeah.
feats.
Thank you. It was definitely intense. No one tells you how intense marketing is. No one tells you it's a special forces kind of job. But here we are.
Wow, very, very impressive. And everyone is welcome to take a look at Zeev's work over on LinkedIn um, and on Twitter or X rather. You could take a look at their company page, at the Windward company pages. A lot of very fascinating data there, as well as, you can note the packaging and the storytelling that they did around that data. So kudos again to you guys. And thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. Again, please keep your eye out for the recording in your inbox in the coming days. And I hope that you join us next month. It's going to be around the topic of inside the mind of the cyber criminal. And we're actually going to feature a branch from the FBI on our panel. So
Nice.
I'm incredibly, incredibly psyched for that. And that is happening on July 23rd. It's a Wednesday. It's going to be the same time as today, 10 a.m. Eastern. Um, if you have any questions to follow up, please feel free to write to me, marketing at WiseStamp.com. If you have a question for Zeev, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn, or you could write to me and I'll forward the question on. And please follow the WiseStamp LinkedIn page for future webinars and other marketing content if you want to hear more. And thank you so much again. And I'm wishing everyone a wonderful day. Thank you, Zeev. It's been a
Thanks so
pleasure.
much. Same here.
I'll, I'll see you next
Hi,
time.
everyone. Thanks.
Bye.